Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the SUMP Learning Program for Mobility Practitioners and the first webinar for you as mobility practitioners that we organize within the SUMPs-Up project. We're really happy to have you all on board. Thanks for registering, and we hope that you find this webinar useful for your own work and for inspiration. And so this is the first webinar out of a series of, in total, 6 webinars. So 5 more are coming up next year. And we'll start with the topic of, well, starting up the SUMP process. And we'll introduce different tools for SUMP. My name is Esther Kreutz. I work for the Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission. We are partner in the SUMPs-Up project and are organizing and are responsible for the different learning activities in the project. So I would like to first give you a couple of tips and hints still about this webinar participation, like technical wise. I mean, I think most of you are connected by audio through your computer, but it's also possible to call in by phone. And as you see, you all are by default muted right now. All participants are muted, and that is due to just have a basic setting. So we try to avoid to have a lot of background noises. And as this is mainly now a webinar first, where we have presentations to listen in. But it's of course possible to still also say something or to contribute, and there are different ways. First of all, on the navigation pane, you find the button where you can raise your hand. So when you raise your hand, we can see and we can unmute you if you want to say something orally. Otherwise, we would really like to encourage you, if you have questions about the presentations, that you use the question section that you find below, as you see on the slide. So if you have any question for any of the presenters, so please insert your questions there. It's a bit easier for us to manage, and that we can take them all up later in the question and answer session, and that we can answer all your questions. We will have different polls coming up during the webinar, where we ask you some questions to get some input, some information from you, your opinions. That is try to have a little bit more interaction, and also for us as a webinar group now to see who is actually here. The webinar team today, you can see here already with some pictures, you get some impression. So we have 3 presenters. The first one will be my colleague Maja Rusonen, who works for the same organization than me. Then we have Anna Dragutescu, who works for eClay Europe, and Anna is also the project coordinator for the whole SUMPs-Up project. And then we have our colleague from City of Vilnius, Kristina Gauce, who will give the city case example today. And this is what we're going to do. We will start with Maja introducing you to different learning activities for mobility practitioners, that means for you, that we offer within the SUMPs-Up project. Then Anna will give a short introduction on different tools for starting SUMP that you can use. Perhaps you have used it already. So she will introduce those tools. And then we will hear the practical case example, like how did the city of Vilnius start their SUMP process, and how have they proceeded so far. So Kristina will give us an insight in that. Then we have time to take your questions or answer the questions. So you can really type in the questions already during the whole program whenever they come to your mind, so we can manage them. And then we'll have a short outlook of what's coming next. Yeah, so then I would like to proceed actually with the first poll. And we would like to know who you are actually, or that we have an idea within the group who is actually here. So we would like to ask you like what organization do you represent? So if you could give us a short indication. Couple of seconds. 84% voted. Okay. So now I show you the results. So we have the majority is from municipal administrations. Well, I guess it's kind of also what we expect. Usually NGOs and, well, other organizations, and then 6% consultancy and educational institutions. But yeah, this is good to know a little bit, to have like to who we have in the group, and we're happy to see, of course, a lot of municipal administrations, because it's a very important topic for you, of course. Great, and now we go straight to the next one. Because as this webinar is on SUMPs, of course, we would also like to know, how is the situation with SUMPs in your city? So what is the status of Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan in your city? Do you have an SUMP? Are you in the preparation phase of your first SUMP? Have you perhaps already implemented your first SUMP, or have you prepared and implement already more? You give us a short indication on that as well. Okay, I will close the poll now and share it with you. So 38% you're already implementing the first year SUMP, so that's really interesting. So you already have prepared the plan and now you're in the implementation phase. And then we have like same level, 31%, both that are preparing the first SUMP and that don't have an SUMP yet. So I think this webinar today, so it will really start from the beginning, and we'll give you some impressions of how to start up the whole process. But I'm sure that it also helps, of course, when you're already a bit further with that. Okay, thank you very much. Then I will hand over the presentation to my colleague Maya, and she will introduce you to different learning activities within our projects. Thank you.
Hello, can you make me as a presenter so
yes,
I can share my...
Yes.
Okay, hello from my side as well. So I will be telling you a bit about the learning activities that SUMPs-Up offers, because we are offering a wide variety of different activities. And the aim of SUMPs-Up project is really to help cities to setting up sustainable urban mobility plans, to have a strategic approach on local level to deal with transport related problems, and also ensure sustainable mobility for everybody. And we have focused on the take-up on the countries where the take-up of the SUMP is low and where the negative effects are very severe. And during the project, we aim to train 100 cities and also offer capacity building for 200 mobility practitioners at least. And what is a mobility practitioner? We define mobility practitioner as somebody who might be working for the city and working with mobility planning or related fields, and who is interested to learn more about SUMPs. But that can be also a person working for an NGO or a consultancy or a company who are working with cities and with different mobility issues, or also a person who is working in a city network or other support organization, or from a related field. So everybody basically can participate who wish to learn more about sustainable urban mobility plans. So we always mention that there are as many different ways to set up SUMPs as there are cities. And it's very important that the plan is designed so that it reflects the local needs, capacities, and the specific planning context. However, there are also common elements that result from implementing the SUMP cycle steps and activities that form important part of the SUMP. For example, you need to understand and analyze the mobility situation before you can start and actually define the mobility needs, and also stakeholders and citizens should be involved in this process. So going through this cycle includes quite many different steps. So it might sound a bit complicated and overwhelming if you look at this cycle, but luckily there is already now a lot of support available for cities who are preparing SUMPs, and we are also offering some activities where you can have help to prepare your own SUMP on the local level. Probably you all know the guidelines for SUMP, but there are also several other guidelines for the different steps in the SUMP process. And what we offer a wide variety of different activities. So we have these SUMP learning programs, and I will tell a bit more how can you join those later. We are also offering e-courses, which is a really easy method to learn when you have time to learn. And then also these webinars that you're now participating, but also we have produced a lot of guidance material, different tools, and different reports to support your work. So the SUMP learning programs, we have already implemented or are currently implementing 4 different learning programs, and we have now just last week opened the call for the last SUMP learning program, the 5. So our target is to select up to 25 planning authorities for this call. And topic for this learning program will be SUMP implementation, financing, and procurement. So these learning programs are always 6-month programs, which include face-to-face workshops, e-learning, and webinars. So there are different kind of tools used, and the focus is really to support cities in their work and also increase the exchange of experiences between different cities. And the target group we have this in this call are planning authorities with already some experience on SUMP or implementing their first SUMP. So this is not targeted to those who are just have started the SUMP process, because we go a bit more detailed into the phases later in the SUMP cycle. And the selected planning authorities will receive 7,500 euros to participate in those activities. And the program is scheduled to be started in May. So if you wish to apply, the call will close on January 11th next year. And there is a lot of information available in our website about the call. Then we have e-learning courses. We offer altogether several e-learning courses for experts who want to work with sustainable urban mobility plans. And the courses helps to go through the different phases and steps in the SUMP process and get guidance on how those could be implemented on local level. And they are self-study courses and available anytime, and they are also free to participate. And we have also included case examples from cities who are already experienced with SUMPs to give you concrete and practical examples how it could be done. Also, we have tips for guidelines that could be helpful and for further reading. And also exercises where you can practice different steps, like how to prepare, what to include in an action plan, and so on. And everything is available in the Mobility Academy. And we will have 7 courses, starting from preparing for SUMP and analysis of the mobility situation, and then going to the SUMP vision and how it can be prepared in cooperation with different stakeholders. And then it follows the SUMP cycle. And then how to set up SUMP as a strategic process and set measurable targets for the plan that can be then also followed. And then how to identify SUMP measures, prioritize those measures, and how to then really prepare the SUMP action plan to ensure the implementation of the plan, and then also implementing the plan. And the first 3 courses will be online from Friday on, so this week. And the next 3 courses, 4, 5, and 6, will be launched in the spring, and then the course 7 will be launched in autumn 2019. But you can then find those from the Mobility Academy. And then we have the webinars, which we are focusing on different aspects of the SUMPs, and we want to introduce useful tools and guidelines for you, as well as showcase case examples. Like we have also today one city example, and then allow some room for discussion and question as well. And we will, as Esther mentioned, we will have still 5 more webinars to come. And the next webinar will focus on data collection in SUMP, and that will be organized in January 2018. So also I would propose to follow our Twitter or website to get the date and get registered as well. Then we already have organized national workshops for mobility practitioners in different countries, but we still have like 2 workshops to come in 2019. The first will be in Italy in May. The place will be defined later, and also in June in San Sebastian. So these are opportunities to exchange with peers from your own country and hear about good examples and SUMPs on local level. And these will be usually organized in national languages as well, taking into the context where cities are working. So for these also, I would propose to follow our website. Then SUMPs-Up has already produced reports. For example, we have produced a status of SUMPs in the EU member state, where you can check the status of your country, like how are the SUMPs prepared there, and is there some support mechanisms available as well. Then we have also produced policy recommendations, which have really targeted recommendations also to local level. So these are available on our website. Then SUMPs-Up has also produced several guidelines, and I'm not going to go into detail of these because Anna will be telling a bit more about these guidelines in the next presentations. But there are the messages that there are already variety of different tools available that are really useful for cities. And these guidelines are, for example, for cities who are in different levels in the SUMP. But that was a brief introduction to all these learning activities that we offer. And next we will then hear a bit more about the concrete tools that you can use in your process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maya, very much for that insight. And we will show you, here you see already the website, and in the end we will show it one more time also, so that you note it down already. There you'll find all the information about upcoming events. Okay, then I would hand over to Anna for the next presentation on different concrete tools for starting the SUMP. Do you, Anna, unmute yourself still that we hear you? Okay, now Anna disappeared from the webinar. Let's have a short. I hope that she will be back in a moment. Okay, now Anna is back. Do you?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back. Yes.
Yes, I had a breakdown of the internet.
Okay. Oh no. Okay, I'll try. Let's try again. Here is the screen.
Yes, can you
Yes. Great.
see me also?
Yes.
Yeah.
We see.
Okay. Good. So I apologize for this short inconvenience. Good morning, everybody from Freiburg. My name is Ana Draguțescu. Thank you, Esther, and thank you, Maya, for introducing the project and for introducing myself. I am the coordinator of SUMPs-Up, and it's my great pleasure this morning to introduce you the SUMPs-Up tools that will help you and support you in the development and implementation of SUMP in your cities. As I have seen in the poll earlier, you find yourselves with the cities you work for or you work with in different stages of SUMP development or implementation, or you haven't started at all. So I'm pretty sure these tools that I will talk to you about today will help you and guide you through this sometimes challenging process. So SUMPs-Up has identified different planning tools and methods, and it's working with different very helpful tools like the self-assessment scheme, the tool inventory, the guidelines that Maya has talked to you about. We have produced manuals for different categories of cities, and the action plan that you have already heard from Maya's presentation, and the SUMPs in member states report. I will guide you through these tools step by step for the next almost 20 minutes. I'll try to be as quick as possible. So the first tool that I'm going to talk about is the SUMP self-assessment scheme, which has been developed in close cooperation with DigiMove and YASME within the framework of the Challenge project. It's an online tool that you can use free, and it allows anonymous assessment. So it's a simple concept of 100 yes and no questions balanced across the SUMP principles. It assesses the SUMP development process, and it provides feedback on strengths and weaknesses for some steps and principles. The self-assessment scheme is closely linked to the update of selected tools, so SUMPs-Up will further enhance the recently launched SUMP self-assessment scheme. So within the framework of SUMPs-Up, we will try to improve this scheme because we have identified certain flaws. Sometimes we have received feedback from cities that it's a bit too long sometimes, and that the simple yes and no questions, sometimes it could make it difficult for the cities to choose an answer. You can see at the bottom of my slide the link you can access to see the old self-assessment scheme, and once the new one will be launched, you will be also informed about this. So we will revise it with and include a lower number of questions. So we will diminish the number of questions. As I told you, we have received feedback that the number of questions are too many. We will develop tailor-made sets of questions for different starting points and for cities without an SUMP. The cities will be supported in identifying strengths and weaknesses to improve their SUMP development. There will be questions related to assessment of the current and future performance, about the development of a long-term long-term vision and implementation, the development of all transport modes, the questions about cooperation across the institutional boundaries, questions about the involvement of citizens or the monitoring and evaluation process. The main focus of the new version will be to help cities even more than we have done it before, to analyze and improve the mobility planning procedure. Optimally, it should be used in an internal municipal workshop, so it's always advised to be used internally, where planners discuss their strengths and weaknesses, question by question. These are just examples of how the questions look like. So some questions are related to the assessment of the SUMP document. Some questions are related to the assessment of planning activities. You can find out more by accessing the link that I have shown you before in the previous slide. Another very important tool that we are very proud of is a tool developed in the framework of that was born between the cooperation of Civitas Satellite and Civitas SUMPs-Up project. Since we have developed, we have understood there are synergies between the two projects and that both projects had to develop such a tool. We work together and we have developed an online database with over 100 tools and methods that will support you and other local authorities and practitioners to make better and informed decisions about which planning tool to apply and that would best fit the local context. So just to give you a short overview of how the tool inventory looks like, you can access it on a link from civitas.eu website. Each tool has a separate page for the that includes a description. You can use the tool immediately. You can go to its individual page, or you can click and read more about it. Just to give you an example, so this is one of the tools. You can read a summary about it. You can select the application areas. So you will see in my following slides about this. And you can access the tool, or you can just have a good overview of what the tool is all about. You can also rate the tool if you find it useful, which will help us understand how useful these tools are for you as a city or as a mobility practitioner, or in your daily work. There have been three main steps to develop the content of the tool inventory. So first, the tool search. We searched for tools, then we categorized the tools, and we went through a quality control. There was an extensive tool search among the outputs of previous or ongoing European mobility projects. There were tools offered by international organizations, private sector, various existing tools, tool collections, tool guides, project and company websites. And we have been mainly guided by the SUMPs-Up needs assessment survey that we have performed at the beginning of the project, where one of the questions asked the cities about tools and methods that would be really useful in SUMP development and implementation. Therefore, 186 SUMP tools were identified by our partners from Ruprecht Consult. After a professional assessment of each tool, 128 tools were selected to be contacted in the first round. Therefore, there has been a tool categorization. So there are thematic areas, application areas, the tool type. So there are these specific filters. The basic information about the tool and the language of the tool. These are very practical information that each tool contains. The entire tool list went through a very extensive quality control, so all entries were reviewed for relevance to mobility planners and decision makers, for readability and completeness. Most tool developers were contacted to obtain additional information about the tools. And yes, this is the final list that you can find on the Civitas website. Another very useful tool we have developed within the project is the SUMP registry. The SUMP registry is a repository of some of the best developed SUMPs across Europe. You can filter the information there by country, population of the city, the language of the documents, since the cities that have uploaded their documents have uploaded in their local language. All documents are PDFs and can be downloaded directly from the website. If you would like to upload an SUMP, then this is also very simple. You can click the button seen below that says, please upload your SUMP here. And this would be very helpful for others to share your good practice in SUMP development. Other SUMPs-Up support tools that I'm pretty sure you'll find very useful are the 3 manuals you've heard about from Maya. So this is a series of manuals covering 3 different city profiles about manuals on integration of measures and measure packages in an SUMP. They provide guidance in identifying the appropriate list of measures for SUMP, and they contain recommendations, rating systems to prioritize this list of measures, and checklists tailored to each city type. So we have a manual for START, that is called START, for beginner cities, that offers examples and suggestions on conducting measure selection for a first SUMP. Then we have the Step Up manual for intermediate cities, that gives advice on applying a more systematic approach to measure selection, and the Innovate manual for advanced cities. This focuses on finding ways to cooperate with stakeholders and the public, and for a higher level of citizen participation in the cities when implementing the list of measures. Just a quick word about the status of SUMPs in EU member states. Maya has also mentioned this document. It's a very extensive research we have developed across all member states country to understand the current status of national SUMP programs, which is very important for us when providing a national recommendations, so providing recommendations for national framework implementation or further development. One of the final supporting tools that I'm going to talk to you about is it's the SUMP action plan. So this comes as a natural follower document of the measure selection manuals because it includes a template for developing an action plan to be included in your SUMP, the responsibilities, resources, stakeholder coordination, time plans that needs to be included in this plan. You will see different action plan templates used by different cities. Then you will understand the entire process that needs to be developed when setting up such a document within the framework of the SUMP development. So thank you very much, and I'll leave the floor to Christine. I hope you heard me. There were no hiccups.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks very much. I think we heard you all well. Before Christina starts, I would like to ask you one more time with the poll about how have you used any of those presented tools, or do you know any of the presented tools that Anna just introduced? Mm-hmm. I'll close the poll and share it. So here we can see, as probably expected, the majority of you have, of course, or know the SUMP guidelines and have probably used them. Okay, 15% the self-assessment, the registry, the tool inventory, that's great. And even 15% our SUMPs-Up guidelines. That's really interesting for us to know, but definitely room for improvement. So really just go and have a look. And all those different tools, they're all available online. And we hope that you find them useful and that you will use them in the future as well. Thank you. So then I will hand or give the presentation to Christina. And yeah, I'm really happy, Christina, that we have you here to give us some insight, some practical insight, how the city of Vilnius has started up their SUMP. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Esther. Thank you for inviting me to join this webinar. As was said already, and I hope some of my colleagues from Vilnius, or at least from Lithuania, are also watching this webinar. I would like to share experience which we had in Vilnius. So before getting to the Vilnius, I would like to share a little bit about our background on mobility management generally in Lithuania. It's quite a new discipline, I must say, and that has some taste also in our planning culture. Then I would like to screen Vilnius SUMP process, and if there is a room, a time, I would like also to show measures which we had planned in Vilnius SUMP. And for those who are preparing the first plan, it could be nice, maybe inspiration for how to present it and how to illustrate it, or maybe even what to suggest. So I'm taking a look to my watch, but Esther, don't hesitate to stop me if I'm taking too long, because sometimes I like to speak. So yes.
Okay.
So about our legal background in Lithuania, in spite of the fact that ELTIS had, and not only ELTIS, different projects in EU and even some countries had prepared the guidelines for SUMP. Of course, we also looked mostly at ELTIS guidelines, because I also involved years ago into the ELTIS Plus. But that knowing that is not really, it was not enough really for starting SUMP process in Lithuania at all. So until maybe, I don't know, 2005, mobility management or mobility planning as a discipline was not really known in Lithuania. And within various projects, European projects, me and some other enthusiasts, we just started lobbying in public authorities, in the Lithuanian parliament, in different ministries, and we were going to the regional levels, the local levels, and as the result of those numerous awareness raising events, we finally achieved really strong support from Ministry of Transport and Communication, and also from Ministry of Environment, and maybe even Ministry of Energy is also quite aware about this discipline and the need and the importance of planning mobility management. So this topic is already recognized in Lithuania, and in spite of the fact that there are a lot of numerous guidelines and recommendations how to prepare it, Ministry of Transport in Lithuania, they had produced their own Lithuanian national guidelines how to prepare sustainable urban mobility plans. and the country had received grants or support from European Union for preparation of plans. So as a result, we have 18 plus 1 as a city and town in Lithuania who had already finished preparation process or just about to finish, like Vilnius as well. Some procedures I think had left. So we had national guidelines. We've got funds, and we've got a long way to do to realize or to prepare our first SUMPs. So I think not to be surprised for you when I will be showing Vilnius, let's say, methodological approach. I would like to note shortly what are our guidelines about and how do we fit to this circle of SUMP planning. So, and unfortunately, Lithuanian guidelines are focusing too much on analysis of existing situation and too much emphasizing the need to look for problems, not that much the need on creating vision and creating goals and targets, how this vision must be reached. So in Vilnius, we had different approach, but most of the cities who were following our guidelines, they really followed guidelines and they prepared very in-depth analysis of existing mobility situation, and then too less attention was paid to develop good scenarios how to develop this mobility situation in the way we want to. And so in this way, if to see how do we fit to a well-known SUMP circle, unfortunately I must say that we are taking like I don't know, like 30 or 25% of all the circles in our national guidelines. That's why some steps from the circle, of course, were missed in Vilnius as well, but not the major one and not the most important one. But the rest of Lithuanian SUMPs, they might look more than feasibility study or some short-term strategy, then but not like a live process of sustainable urbanization. Can you hear me?
Your audio has been breaking. Christina, your audio has been breaking now a couple of times. Just that we hear
so maybe
you right
I should
now.
turn off webcam to have it better. Okay. So yes, so Lithuanian guidelines, we told us to analyze 9 topics, 9 thematic areas, and most of the cities, of course, were enough to do it. But this very sectoral approach, I don't think it's really good approach. So in Vilnius case, we did multidisciplinary analysis, and we were not looking at the topic as, for example, modal split or urban freight. We were looking at the city as a full picture with different topics in one time. So you will see in the measures, if I have time and if I have good connection, you will see in measures how did it look. But most of the cities, we just analyzed those 9 thematic areas and we produced separate suggestions how to improve each or few of these thematic areas. And these thematic areas, if you see full list, let's say, of the most popular mobility management strategies and measures in Lithuania, only those brown ones were really covered, while I think that some other colors are much more important. So in Vilnius case, we covered all well-known measures and inventing maybe even new ones, but just to understand the process in country, I would like to point it out that there was quite narrow attitude to what city can suggest, because of quite narrow attitude in recommendations what to analyze. So that was background, and have to go to the Vilnius case and to show SUMP process. I would start from very basic steps from the circle. Well, they were not so basic, but just for those who are beginners and for those who have no time or have no budget or have no capacities to go step by step, as Eltis had suggested years ago. I would like just point out, from my perspective, the most important steps, and just to keep them always done. So first of all, of course, what we did, and that took quite long to determine and to agree on common vision for Vilnius, and so to set the goals how to reach this vision. And this process was not really easy because because of the plan culture maybe, and a lack of participatory approach in the country. Because when I started asking stakeholders and let's say owners of this project, what is the vision for city and how should it fit to the SUMP, sometimes I was hearing that you are planning and you must suggest. So that was really crucially important to and we applied various methods like creative workshops and some tete-a-tete communication to create common vision and common goals with common targets and common indicators. So that was, I think, a very important step, and I would suggest not to start even doing and analyzing while the vision is not clear. Analyzing and analysis part was our, I think in all the Lithuania, it was quite a weak point, because planners, they were playing with data too much, from my point of view, and Vilnius did the same. Although Vilnius had thankfully all the data, it was almost collected. We didn't really need to put many effort to collect new data, but analyzing in ridiculous details some processes or some details of, I don't know, for example, tires of electric bus, are they much louder than tires of diesel bus, and so on and so on. So we get in that kind of details which were not used, and they just took the time and some initiatives and motivation from the planners. So don't repeat our mistake. Then the first step didn't really happen very much in Vilnius, but we tried, is to identify with politicians how far they are ready to go. Because before, from my perspective, and when somebody, for example, myself would be coordinating another plan, it's not worth to start thinking about measures if you don't know how far politicians are ready to go. If they say that they are not ever undertaking such measure as pricing or parking or low emission zones or congestion charges, don't even start working on developing those measures. Or if they deny the need of education and awareness raising, don't start the communication campaign, and only prioritize yourself on what you really believe politicians are ready to implement. Because the plan with hypothetical approach, I think, is not very useful, because in this cloud of hypothetical measures which are not going to be implemented, the real measures could be lost. So my suggestion is to clear the politicians how ready they are, how far they are ready to go with strategy, with discrimination of cars and so on, and then only to set up the measures. And the final part of our SUMP was, and I left the project at that moment, and my team finished, my previous team finished selecting and evaluating most effective measures and describing circumstances in what in what situation those measures should be applied. Like we didn't put too much effort to, I don't know, to point out every bus stop which needs to be, I don't know, got closer to the residents or changed somehow or had to have more frequency of buses. We didn't do that in details, but what we did, we described in what density of residents, what I don't know, environment in terms of public transport, in terms of shared mobility, in terms of bicycle infrastructure and all of the measures, what is needed when we have certain zones, certain residence and working place combination, and so on and so on. So that was done, and as I said, Vilnius is just about to be confirmed, approved in the council. So I think it's done. We can say it's done. And implementation of the measures, I wrote that it's not done yet, but I think I deleted the slide, but I wanted also, especially to the cities who don't have SUMPs, to say and to point out that you can have mobility management even if you don't have a SUMP, because in Vilnius we had quite a good public transport, although use and model split is not very good, but public transport as such was working quite well. We have a few sharing mobility operators. We have already some other measures implemented without having a SUMP. So now is only what needs to be done now is to finish what was done, or to apply new measures, and to continue monitoring, are they effective or not? Because as I showed in my previous slide, monitoring was not programmed in Lithuanian guidelines. And for example, in Vilnius case, we of course set indicators of effect. What the results, what effect do we expect after implementing a group of measures? But I cannot say truly with confidence of 100% that those indicators would be followed and monitored. And what happens if someone sees that a measure is not that effective as what expected? So this system was not, unfortunately, was not done in Vilnius SUMP, neither in any Lithuanian SUMP, and this is, I think, a very weak point in terms of process, not the document. So another very important thing to say is, well, this slide is just to remind me not to forget to say how important is communication with, first of all, the project owner. Well, in Vilnius case, it was vice mayor of Vilnius. He was kind of owner of this project, and he was leading a working group for this project. So it's crucially important to really involve different stakeholders, different actors, academics, society, NGOs, and so on, and to work proactively with them. And I think what was very good in Vilnius case, I think we made them to believe and to feel that Vilnius SUMP is owned by everyone, not by city only. Although if there is negative critic, then yes, it's only planners and only city. But when we have something good, I can feel that people are owning it, and we are suggesting some extras from Vilnius SUMP, and so on and so on. So that, I think, is very good. To reach this situation, we had a communication plan, and one plan was with stakeholders and with a working committee and working groups, and it was more or less described already in recommendations and guidelines. And sometimes it was quite official, sometimes it was really effective. But then we have a huge plan of and huge numerous list of things what we've done to get the society into the participation in preparation and discussing, and I hope in implementation process as well. So we had thematic conferences, even international one. We have a lot of thematic events like like workshops, meeting somebody who are like target group, like people with special needs. We had even technical visits. We met healthcare representatives, for example. We met academics in transport. We met students in which are doing infographics for cycling, and so on, so on. So we not only spread the message, we not only raised awareness of citizens and I don't know, important actors, but also got I think very good feedback in terms of discussions, in terms of suggestions, in terms of avoiding to make some mistakes and so on. And we also have publicity via our website, which you can check. There is a link, and via participation in TV or radio shows and writing by ourselves, or just giving interviews to papers and so on and so on. So I think this was very important, and we set up this communication plan from very beginning. And maybe we didn't tick all the boxes, but we did most of them, and I think it was very, very good, and I wish you to have the same. So about to continue about methodology and process of doing Vilnius SUMP, I need to get you a little bit into the context, not into the details about how many streets or how many cars do we really have or bus lines, but just to show that we see Vilnius not in the boundaries, which are those brown lines. We see Vilnius as something really bigger, and we had kind of 3 different cities in the city, and then in general we have 5 different zones to analyze and to suggest. So that's why our methodology was differing and our measures were differing from part to part. So the most important and the most sensitive, of course, is historical city center, old town, then central zone, then middle zone with high density of residents, then all the Vilnius with private housing and industry and airport and so on is another zone, and the zone, I don't know, like 20 kilometers radius from Vilnius boundaries was also taken into account, because commuting is really challenging Vilnius, as I think most of the cities are feeling the same. Commuting is really an issue. So that just to explain why our some methodological approach was in the way it was. So even for doing analysis, we already were looking at the not only on the transport districts, which are really important for metrics, but and modeling maybe, and understanding behavior of commuters, but also just to realize how do people differ and how do they travel and why do they travel in this way. We even model split had for different thematic areas, and then solutions, of course, arrived accordingly. Another important thing to say, in Lithuania, behavioral changes is not discipline which is taken really into serious account, and it bothers me a lot, but it's more often understood that SUMP is about transport and commuting and infrastructure, and less about behavioral changes. So to support this discipline, although it was not in our task, but we just understood that it's necessary. We had a nice team of anthropologists who really helped us with advices how to get and how to change attitude of different target groups in different areas of the city. So that was also one of the good lessons I would like to transfer to our cities. Don't end up with urbanist, environmental and engineering people and economists. Have philosophy or psychology or anthropology nearby as well. So having this 5 zones concept, each topic we analyzed in 4 approaches. In urbanistic approach, if it's city center, what should we exclude or include, for example? Of course, in terms of infrastructure planning, although we know very well that the mobility management is not about giving new supply, but some hygiene, some things still, they are still a must in Lithuania and in Vilnius. So infrastructure planning was on our agenda as well. And of course, having already strategical decision for some infrastructure and urbanistic approach, like for example, I don't know, extending parking zone. Of course, ITS and the management solutions were added as well. We didn't have ITS as separate topic. We had it inside of every measure we were suggesting. And another block of suggestion was, of course, social marketing and education. If, for example, if we are talking about pedestrian conditions for pedestrians, and we say that it's necessary to have, for example, school travel plans, how pupils must go to the school. The most important thing in this measure is education for teachers and parents and children before we actually build better conditions for walking or riding bicycle or scooter or so on. So each topic was analyzed in those 4 approaches, and suggestions were given accordingly. For selecting measures, of course, we had in mind effectiveness we want to achieve, and most of our measures were really about doing changes in behavior and decreasing negative transport impact, but and also about improving quality of life and accessibility to spaces. So while selecting measures, we were thinking about these 3 major expectations for the measure, but for choosing and deciding on the particular measure, we of course did a good case studies analysis, and we have great library of various tools and various decisions which could be applied in cities, but also which is not, I don't think it's really necessary, and I don't even think it's useful, but we did modeling to test a bit how, for example, how public solutions for public transport really affect city life. And we of course did my colleagues did a huge work on assessing economically each measure and in each measures group. So technically we did a lot of work to kind of convince ourselves and themselves about each measure. Practically, already from those pre-expectations, we knew which measure we want to suggest and to be implemented. So this was our methodological approach, and as I said, the very important thing was to agree on the vision. If we know that Vilnius has common vision for city in all the spheres to be open and fast, traveling we didn't see priority for traveling only speed, so we positioned vision for Vilnius a little bit differently, and their mayor and cabinet of mayor and some other politicians and working group were really working on saying this vision and describing with key goals and with real objectives to achieve. So, well, I probably won't get into the details about each objective or each goal, how they laid out into the real measures, because they are not very different, I think, from any city. We just believe the transport system must be friendly for families. And as it was said, I think in Copenhagen or Malmö's SUMP, city must serve and mobility must be so the kid and so the old person can use it. So our main focus was about it. Funny, I first of all showed objectives and then the goals, but never mind, I'm not going to read it anyway. So as best expression as the most important KPI for our vision and for our goals and objectives, of course, was modal split. And the modal split I'm showing you at the moment is not the same as it remains in SUMP, because it was when the point is showing it that when we started creating vision and goals, we had very ambitious expectation for modal split in 2030, like to decrease twice usage of cars and to multiply 10 times usage of bicycles and so on. But after selecting already measures and doing some modeling and doing also questionnaires and research on traveling behavior, we saw that until 2030 is really not impossible to achieve, because we have like 2 years for implementing measures according to our national guidelines, and then we have 10 years to obtain the results. So we changed later on this desirable model split, we changed, but it still remains ambitious and there are quite a things to do to achieve it. So that was our process and that was our vision. And I don't know, Esther, if I have time, or is it worth to go through and to show a few slides how our measures looks like, not really saying much about it.
I mean, I think you still can take some time to, like 5-10 minutes to do. I think it's very interesting for the others to hear.
Okay, so as I said, in Vilnius we didn't look at as a set of the different topics, but first of all, what we did, we took a look at the Vilnius structure and having in mind those zones which are already presented, we kind of draw the priorities and criteria for each zone. Like if it's Old Town and Central Zone, we agreed eventually not to have regular cars at all. Therefore, some measures were suggested. In the Middle Zone and other territories, we agreed maybe to have some cars, but again with some restriction with different parking policy and so on and so on. So first of all, we agreed on what we want to see as a result in each part of city. And for this, of course, is very important the network for commuting for streets. And in Lithuania, we have situation that even if we know the categories for streets, and even we hypothetically know how do we need to serve for commuters and for carrying passengers and goods, it's not. In fact is it differently, and if we have the lowest and highest category streets, they look similar and people behave similar. If we have the local category streets which are meant for children and adults to get home with low speed and with bicycle in the mainstream and so on, in fact, in reality is not the same, because the streets are so wide, you can go so fast, and they are serving for transit and they are unsafe and so on. So what we did, first of all, we just set this street network in prioritizing and suggesting particular measures how to make it happen that in the highest category street public transport doesn't go and people doesn't go and birds and animals don't fly and don't happen, because a category is for freights and transit, and they are not going through the city. Then we have another category for main public transport network, and this category of streets must be the priority for public transport, and then only with some possibilities for cars to be used, and of course with good separated infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrian. And then we have another category of streets which serve mainly in residential areas. And of course, the most important thing for us is just to show that in the most of the streets are meant for reaching objects, and they must be designed in the way and built in the way and behaved in the way every passenger, every person feels safe and can use the measure he chooses to use for transportation, for his mobility. So that was our first thing. And then on this structure of the city and the street network, we of course set all the different measures which are connected. So I think I told it already, but then for example, knowing the street network and knowing our zones, we could set some restrictions, particularly for urban freight and for speed in some residential areas in the city center. We also analyzed and suggested zones which should be low speed zones, home zones, so streets could be used as public spaces, but not as place for parking and for commuting and even for speed transit. Further, we suggested, of course, in the city center, restriction of transit, various schemes were suggested. Also, we suggested the boundaries for low emission zones. We suggested which zones should be car-free zones from now on, and we suggested which zones should be shared spaces, and everything has spatial localization, as you can see, but not in very details. I already mentioned that we suggested cargo management and some restriction for residential areas, for densely populated areas, for center, and how to consolidate logistic and proposals for cycling cargo and so on and so on, which by the way is already in reality. We have cargo bikes delivering goods and in Vilnius even in winter time. And I almost already showed the zones for low emission and low speed, and quite natural and public zones. I think it's also very important, because without having this we cannot draw main pedestrian streams and areas. What else we did? Accordingly, of course, we suggested major changes in parking policy, because you probably didn't have chance to see, but we suggested to increase the boundaries and to increase price, and because in comparison with the Baltic states, in Vilnius parking is really cheap. In comparison with Europe, it's extremely cheap. So we suggested new zones for parking, for paid parking. We suggested to increase price. We suggested to increase boundaries. We suggested, of course, network and development of regular park and ride or multimodal points. Depends on how pilot project will be successful. And having this parking policy in mind, we of course knew that public transports must collaborate and correspond to this policy of street network, of parking policy. So main routes of public transport are connected with future public park and ride or multimodality point. We also have lines for fast public transport. When I say fast, I mean not really bus rapid transport, but like smaller version of it, which we have already. The regular or bigger buses, we don't have physically separated line, but we have priority. We have fewer bus stops, and we are fast and effective. By the way, when we looked at data, we saw that if a little bit usage of public transport is decreasing year by year, in routes of fast buses is increasing. So I think it is very important having something faster than regular buses and trolley buses. We also have ambitions to abuse railway, which is crossing Vilnius, but now it has only very few stops when in Vilnius and few in boundaries or already out of the boundaries of Vilnius, but it's not absolutely not used for daily commuting, and the reasons are known and the solutions are suggested how to incorporate into the city network. And of course, we, as I said previously, we described some preconditions and some zones where public transport needs really to be very close, very fast, very effective, and to get very reliable. And less intensive public transport zones were also suggested in less residential areas or industrial areas or so on. And of course, we have zones where public transport has to be improved, but not necessarily in the same quality and the same volume as in the city center or residential areas. It could be on demand or other modes of public collective transport, but not necessarily regular buses or trolley buses.
Christina,
And
just if you would slowly
so,
come to the end, so we can take some questions also, but perhaps you just present the most important things.
So of course we had a suggestion and solutions for bicycle network and for the increasing system of shared bicycle, which is existing, and I cannot go faster because of animation. And the final, let's say, point, at least in my presentation, is pedestrians. We have main routes for daily use for pedestrians, and they must be good. And also we have another measure is each school, each business center, each I don't know, hospital and so on must have a travel plan. And first of all, conditions to be reachable on foot, not mentioning all the measures. So yeah, so that was all I wanted to show, and not to get into the details with solutions, just to show how we were positioning and what was our starting point and how did we end up with particular schools at the end. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much for such a very comprehensive and very inspiring presentation. And I think there was really a lot of information for all of us to digest, but it was really, really impressive. Thanks a lot. And I will answer the biggest question right away to everybody. You will all receive the recording of the webinar and also all the presentation afterwards. So you can have a look in peace on all the slides one more time, and we will also share the contacts, etc. So if there's something coming up afterwards. Then there was a question coming up, Christina, if Vilnius has an English version of your SUMP and if you have it available.
English version? No,
Yeah.
I'm afraid no. Well, we had because we were working together with my beloved Professor Tomarai, which we probably know. We had some parts translated, like objectives, like you see, this presentation is also in English. So there is some parts in English, but we have website with all the material, and I think Google Translator also a lot. And you can always contact me, and I could say that this question, for example, was not elaborated in our plan, and it's not worth to look for example in our SUMP. So those parts which we have, I can try to collect, for example, next week, and to try to share. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was one question from Tünde, and she had another question about if the Vilnius SUMP has been approved by the city council.
It's just about to happen.
Okay.
Procedures are so that we first of all need to finish, and then to to have publicity, then to go to ministry, and now I think these are the final stages of approving. If some of my colleagues are participating, you can write in comments. Maybe it's already this Wednesday. It's Thursday, Wednesday. So council
Today,
is
yes.
working. Yeah. So it could be
Okay.
even today a day when
Okay.
it will be. Okay.
Okay. Great. Yeah. For all the other attendees, if you still have some questions, you can add them to the question box, or otherwise raise your hand or somehow if you have something immediate right now. I would have a question, because I mean, I have to say it was really impressive to listen to like the whole process, and well, a few things I knew already before, and I'm always every time especially impressed of this whole process of involving citizens and what you mentioned about the ownership and so on. And I think it's really great that you have the vice mayor that is kind of owning the process. But I would like to know a little bit, like, how do you work internally in a very practical way? You said that he is leading the working group. So who started the whole thing up then, or who set up this working group, and who was in the working group? And can you tell a little bit more about that?
So I was invited to first of all in our recommendation, national recommendation, there is requirement that SUMPs are not shouldn't be prepared by planners only. There should be officially some working committee which consists from NGOs and different departments of the city and so on. So this was the legal and official working committee, which was established even before setting up the task for SUMP and hiring the company and me as coordinator and so on. So that official part was done because of regulation.
Okay.
Unofficially, vice mayor had we had a steering committee, like a cabinet with really stakeholders, like director of public transport operator company, like administrative director of the city. Whom else we had? Carriers, director of carriers, really important persons were in this lower scale working group. But this group was working on vision mainly. After it got already to the contracting planners and preparation process, this group was not really needed that much, because when actually work started, we continued working with planners and different stakeholders. So this working group, like steering committee, it had participated in vision setting up process. But all the way of preparation, vice mayor, of course, was owning process and was really showing attention, not always maybe supporting with some decisions, but sometimes very supporting. And then when we reached the stage of clear vision and some conceptual suggestion, the mayor office and mayor also joined this this process as well, and we had like I don't know, 4 maybe very productive meetings with mayor and his office, and so he was also always was informed and giving some feedback to us too. So these were then we've been working with politicians again through our vice mayor and city council secretary. We were trying to involve them and invite, but this part at the beginning was zero effectiveness, because politicians were not showing up. But we were collecting one by one. Well, actually, for example, one politician wanted to just was in a position and wanted to participate, to be able to, I don't know, to do something just in a bad manner as politicians. So he started to be interested, and then he get involved. Another politician, he was, for example, Englishman, and he was already aware about this process. So because of the interest in whole sustainability, he got involved. Another is another politician, his background is, for example, architect, and he got interested. So by the end, even in city council, we had kind of group of supporters. Although at the beginning they were quite opposing because of their job is to oppose what mayor is doing. So this way we collected some politicians and we had really good dialogue with them. And in terms of working group who was really planning and writing, so again, if my colleagues are listening, we were really few, to be honest, and I was not really helping with writing or analyzing things because of all what you have just heard and internal communication. So I was responsible for managing communication within the team, which was quite small, and also with owner of the project, of all the stakeholders of the community, and so on. And we had quite a few people which were, how to say, universal, and they could work on different topics. And we had very specific specialists who were doing very concrete parts like modeling transport flows or analyzing and describing design for people with special needs. So we had a smaller we just integrating them, but generally those 2 years, 3 to 4 persons were working only on this mobility plan. So it was not difficult to coordinate because the team was quite, as I say, quite small, but we were subcontracted different specialists, like I already mentioned, anthropologic, economist, and ITS solutions, and so on. So we didn't have them in house, and but we had budget for them, which was good. Yeah. So that was procedure.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I think that is really interesting for others to hear also how it's like organized in practice. And I think it's really interesting to hear how you work with politicians. And also, I mean, it's also always, of course, important to hear that those things that might be a bit problematic. But I think you succeeded really well. And Violetta from Zagreb already wrote here also that she feels very inspired and that you did a great job. And I think so too. Great. So if there are no other questions coming up right now to Christina, I'm sure, is it okay then if somebody has something later on that people could contact you?
Of course, and
yes,
I would like to, because Vilnius SUMP is finished, and I need hungry for another SUMPs. Kidding.
Yes.
So yes, if there are something I can give advice or share, just write me my email.
Great.
Well, at least I show my email on the screen.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, the email is there, and we can include your contact details also in the wrap-up email to all the participants. Okay, thanks a lot, Christina, for participating and for being part of this even from your work trip. Thanks a lot. And so we will go one more time to some polls before we end the webinar. Just a second. Because before we end the webinar, we would like to know from you as participants what kind of support you would be interested in the future. What kind of methods you would appreciate as municipalities or as mobility practitioners to learn more about the SUMP, so that we also get some input in our own work and perhaps new projects or ideas what we could do to help you with that topic. Couple of seconds still. I think I can close now and share. So we have here 64% for all webinars, training workshops, and peer-to-peer exchange. 43% e-learning, and then the guidelines on SUMP. Yeah, I mean, the guidelines on SUMP are currently revised, so they will be launched next year, like the new version of the SUMP guidelines, and they will still be, of course, like the basis for all the other activities. The e-learning courses, as Maya announced, so we will launch the first package from that we developed now within this project this Friday, so you can also have a look and see if that's a method that would be good for you. Otherwise, yeah, I think this is a clear information also for webinars. I think it's really a good method to have a some kind of short inspiration, perhaps during a day, training workshops, and then peer-to-peer exchange. I think that's also something that, yeah, we should take on, to have like a bit like in smaller groups and have really exchange between cities. That would be probably really useful. Okay, thank you for this info. And then a last one. As I said, that we will have more webinars coming up. And there are some ideas for topics already, but we would like to also hear from you, of course, like what topics regarding SUMP you would be mainly interested in. We have here SUMP measure selection, like how to select measures, how to prepare the action plan, how to integrate SUMP to other planning practices and other plans like urban planning and climate related plans, etc. Innovative financing measures for SUMP, and then stakeholder involvement and citizens participation. That will give us also a bit an indication of what are the topics that are most interesting to you, and then we can try to find those good case examples in our networks and in Europe to present and to give some input and inspiration. I close the call now and share. And so we have here stakeholder involvement, preparing the action plan, and integrating of SUMP as the three most voted, so to say, the financing and then the measure selection. But it seems that all topics are very relevant, and I assume also that we will actually take up most of them in those, at least in the coming webinars for next year. As Maya said, the next one will be on data collection, but then we will organize still 4 more after that, the next one. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now it's 34 past 12 here where we are, or past 11 or wherever you are. So we come to the end of our webinar. Yeah, just one more time. So you will receive a wrap-up email after this, after we close the webinar. This will contain the information where you find the recording and all the presentations and contact details and links, etc. For yeah, so that you can still have a look on all the material. Then I think I can already say that have a nice holiday season, and thank you very much for participating. And then we hope to have you on board in the next webinars as well. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye bye.